Pleased to have back here on the program one of our favorites that we enjoy watching. Talk about the association that he played for so many years in and won in as well. Now he's one of the best announcers talking about it on ESPN as well as locally, along with Iron Eagle, broadcasting Nets games. Richard Jefferson back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you doing, Richard?
Great, Rich. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So, what do you think the state of the Nets are right now as you and I are sitting here talking, Richard?
Well, I think looking back on that game 3, that grinded out and how important it was, a lot of people saw that as like, oh, well, the Nets aren't going to shoot like this, and Kyrie and Kevin are going to be fine. And I've always felt this. The longer this series goes, the more it favors Milwaukee. From the standpoint of, you lose James Harden in that, and after the second play, now you're asking Kevin and Kyrie to hold down the fort against high-level basketball. Oh, excuse me. And they haven't done that consistently. So, they've had injuries, they've been banged up, and COVID protocol, but now you're like, oh, you got to go 6 games against Boston. You got to go 5, 6, 7 games against Milwaukee. You got to go 5, 6, 7 games against Philly or whoever's coming out on that side. So I just think that, the Nets, because of their injuries, and I think losing that game 3 in that tight one, I think the momentum has completely shifted, especially now with the Kyrie injury. That's, even if he misses a week, that pretty much, in my opinion, probably puts them in a very, very difficult position.
So it does look like, in your opinion, that this is going to have to be finished up by Durant and the rest of the supporting cast minus the 2 other super teamers on the roster. That's the way you're looking at it right now.
Yeah, and even when you look at, let's go back in the past and look at some injuries, I'll stand by it. Toronto did everything that they needed to do, and Kawhi Leonard had one of the best runs that we had seen in a while. But ultimately, Kevin Durant being out and Klay Thompson being out is the reason why the Golden State Warriors didn't win a championship. And right now you have a situation where James Harden, his hamstring that he's been dealing with for months now, and there is no timetable, and even you can only count on what you can count on. So even if he's able to come back in a week or able to come back in a couple of days, that hamstring's been giving him problems for months. It's set him out. So how can you really take into account can he really do the type of load, especially with Kyrie being out? So it's just been it's very tough. I believe in Kevin Durant. He's one of the best players in the world. I'm not saying that guy can't win 2 games by himself, but the road is definitely very, very difficult.
Richard Jefferson here on the Rich Eisen Show. What do you know about Harden? Anything? What are you hearing about his hamstring and then?
There's not much to be said. Rich, you've been doing this, since before I was born. Not 8.
I know.
You know those hamstrings, especially. It's like the minute you hear hamstring, the first thing you hear is reoccurring. Like in your brain, you hear reoccurring.
Right.
From the standpoint of like it happens once, you try and come back too early, then it happens again, and then now it's just something that's a maintenance to get you through the season. And hamstrings are just one of those like injuries that if you don't take 2-3 months off, it's never going to fully heal, and there's always going to be twinge. There's always going to be things. So I haven't heard anything specifically. I haven't even heard much about Kyrie's ankle. But again, giving it the eye test, Kyrie had his hands full with Drew Holiday being 100% healthy. Like Drew Holiday was doing a very good job, though both those guys were competing really well. So now, with Kyrie with that ankle, let's say Kyrie's at 70%. Like, even if he's able to go out there and he's at 70-75%, that doesn't give, a lot of room for error still. So I just think it's very, very difficult, the position that they're in. Now, again, we've seen crazier things. You got Kevin Durant on your team, you got a chance, right? Like, it doesn't matter who you're playing against, who are the other 5 guys, you have a chance. It might be small, but you have a chance.
Richard Jefferson here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what do you think is going through Durant's mind? Very few athletes are seemingly as attuned to what is being said about him, quite like Kevin. And, the silly backlash that occurred during the second half of that game yesterday is that look at what Durant looks like without his super team friends. So what do you think his mindset is right now as you and I are talking going into that crucial Game 5 Tuesday night, Richard?
Well, I don't want to speak for Kevin Durant because I don't know his mindset. I know that he's one of those guys, just like every great player goes out there with something to prove. That's just how they're made up. Kobe's, the LeBrons, they just go out there with something to prove. Not that they need validation, but that's how they stay motivated after all the accolades and all the success. Like every time they step on the court, they're trying to prove something. I don't make a ton of all that BS that's being said because people just want to crack jokes. But Kevin Durant is different than some of the other great players. Like James Harden is one of those guys that can give you 35 and 10. So he's getting other people involved. Luka Doncic, another guy that give you, 35, 40, and 10. LeBron James. Those are guys that they are in an offense amongst themselves. You plot them on the floor, they're going to go get their points, and they're going to make sure that they're responsible for 20, 30 points on the other side. I think Kevin Durant is more of just a lethal scorer. And so for him, he's got to figure out a way to get other people involved because he has that ability. But also he's got to go out there and make sure he's putting up 35-ish points, if they're going to have a chance to win this series. So I don't know his mindset, but I think he's definitely doing the equation of what is it that I need to do to be successful in this series.
Let's put in perspective, if you can, for us, Richard Jefferson, what Chris Paul's doing. He is somebody who retired from the NBA at the age of 37. Here he is at the age of 36 doing what he did, not just last night, but in that entire series, doing what he did coming back from what looked like a very serious shoulder injury against the Lakers. Put in perspective from your perspective what Chris Paul's been doing, if you don't mind.
I think we make too much of these legacy talks and all of this other stuff. But I know Chris Paul he's just been doing it for so long. His defense, his offense, his focus. He's definitely, as much as he's, running the young players right now, he's always had an old school, grinded type of aggressive vibe to him. That's just Chris Paul. And, people joke and say he rubs people the wrong way. But, I've been having conversations just like, where would you rank Chris Paul all time? And I was like, dude, if Chris Paul goes in NBA Finals, like at this point in time, there's probably only 4 or 5 point guards that you would even consider that to be better than him in modern day. I'm not going to go back to the Bob Cousy's and that space, but if you're talking about Jason Kidd, Magic Johnson, John Stockton, Steve Nash,
Isaiah,
like how many? Like the list is very, very small. Mm-hmm. If you look at defensively, offensively, what he's able to do, and then the longevity and what he's able to do. There was conversations about him, people, basically giving up on him, ship him off to OKC. They're not sure what they're going to do. He takes them to the postseason, has a little value. Then James Jones decides to, say, hey, come on, come do what you did in OKC, come do it in Phoenix. And he has delivered in spades. It's been so impressive. So I'm still curious to see how it ends up. I don't know who's going to come out on that other side, but Utah, Clippers, that's a big matchup, but Phoenix looks really good right now.
Well, let me tell you, man, just seeing Chris Paul being in the NBA Finals, and then I would love to see the Nets there as well, to be honest with you, just for the fact that, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, all in an NBA Finals, although on separate teams, and then the other person who's right there is Harden, apparently, with whom he did not famously get along to. That's why he wound up at OKC, winding up in Phoenix. I mean, that would be off the charts. That would be off the charts.
There would definitely be some poeticness to that, but we'll see. I think Phoenix looks like they're in a good spot. They obviously, whoever they're going to get next is going to be a load, but I think the Brooklyn Nets right now have a lot on their plate, and I'm very, very curious to see how they react to it.
So, what did you think of Jokic getting ejected? Do you think he deserved it?
No, it's just so tough. And we know as players, like, we're all looking for competitive edges. Somebody swipes at you and you're going to go down and hold your nose and you're going to go down. But it's just like, even when you look at the replay, he didn't hit his face. Was I missing something?
I thought it was the big, huge windup, his size, the size of who he hit, the fact that he did seem to make contact with his face. I mean, we got a still photograph right now. He just looks like one of those winged fighters coming in to take out an Ewok. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't look fair. So
we also have to take into account that players will embellish it. Players will embellish it because look, if the MVP is thrown out of the game or something happens, it benefits you. You don't care. I'll flop to get the MVP thrown out of the game right now. Give me a jersey. I'll go out there and do anything I can to get him out of the game. But I think the NBA is doing their best to clean up stuff. But sometimes you come up with solutions to problems that didn't exist. And I think the NBA has done that in a lot of different instances. You're trying to come up with solutions that problems that weren't even necessary. All the reviews, all the different things that are going on. Now it's just a flagrant one. You have people that have watched the game of basketball their entire lives, like Mark Jackson and Doris Burke and Jeff Van Gundy. And they are 50-50 on the flagrant calls. Like, those guys have sat there in those seats for 15 years, and they literally are 50-50 on, well, is that a flagrant? Well, we called a flagrant last week on that, or is that a flagrant one? So it just shows you that they need to address it. They need to make things a little bit more clear, and they need to make sure that, while you're trying to protect the players, you also have to look at it and see that players are trying to embellish to get the competitive advantage.
If you had to choose a one seed remaining for most likely to win it all, which one would it be?
Utah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Utah.
Why?
They just look so good. And I know the Clippers are starting to play well. I think people are starting to realize that T-Lue teams, they get better as series goes on, right? Like, he just starts to figure it out. He's very big on, you call him a chess player. And I think now, where Utah's in a little bit of trouble, I think taking Zubac off and playing Batum, now you're forcing Rudy the whole time to guard a small player. Not having Serge Ibaka is the one that really hurts him, because Serge Ibaka could stretch the floor and he could guard Rudy and give you some presence, like from the shot blocking standpoint. Obviously, he's hurt, but like, you just look back and it's like, oh, Serge Ibaka would have been huge in this series, right? Because he would have done everything to offset some of the stuff that Rudy Gobert does. But I just think that their team is so locked in. As a team, they're well balanced. They got Jordan Clarkson off the bench, and they let him do what he does, and he delivers. You got Conley. You got so many shooters, and it's not just Donovan Mitchell. It's not just a good defensive team. You just have depth and balance. And I think right now Utah looks so good, where Philly has that. They're still dealing with some stuff. Obviously, you don't know about Embiid's health and all the stuff surrounding that, but I think Utah has been the most impressive team, with Phoenix being a close second.
Plus, Donovan Mitchell's the greatest player in the history of the Jazz, right, Richard?
Oh, man. Wow, man. Stephen A., that's your guy. You work with him.
I do love him. I love him.
You got to love him. But I'm like, Stephen A., like, come on, dog. Like, even if – and I didn't go as far as to say it that, but I was like, even if he wins a championship this year, he ain't the greatest player in the Jazz. So, like, let's not start doing that. Is he on his way? But I just think that people need to understand that, like, the competitiveness that goes, Luka Doncic has had historic years. He's not the best player to ever play for the Mavericks, right? Like, that's just not the truth. It's not the truth. Now, is he on his way?
Mm-hmm.
Is he, another 7-8 years of it? Yeah, we're going to be talking about, like, him being better than Dirk. But let's not give people that are 5, 6, 7 years into their career, and then now all of a sudden we want to put them in a place with people that did it for 20. Like, I just think that's unfair. I know it's fun clickbait, but I think that's unfair to how hard people worked for damn near 2 decades to establish who they are and what they stood for, to just kind of gloss over that quickly.
Okay, so to wrap this thing up, Richard, other than just get healthy, what do the Nets need to do? What can be done that can be somewhat controlled to get them where they need to go, which is the next round? What do you have for me on that front?
I really think that they just have to shoot the ball really well. And I think Kevin Durant, when you look at, they don't truly have a backup point guard. Mike James is more of a scorer. So I think Kevin Durant's got to get you 8, 9 assists and got to get you 30, 35 points. Guys are going to have to shoot the ball well, and they're going to have to keep playing defense. I know there's a lot of questions about the Nets' defense, but their defense has actually been, I don't want to say a non-story but it's been a non-story because they haven't been lacking in defense. So I think they're just going to have to shoot the ball, pretty crazily over the next 2 games because Milwaukee looks like their shooting is starting to pick up. These guys are starting to settle in. So that's really it. I think their defense has been quality enough. They just got to make sure that they're hitting enough shots, and that's going to be difficult without 2 of the great scorers, in the league on the team.
Richard Jefferson, I appreciate it. I always enjoy our chats. You always make me smarter, and if you don't mind, I'll look for my call over the next couple of rounds as well. I'd love to do it.
100%, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Always. Thank you. That's Richard Jefferson. I follow him on Twitter. You should as well. What is at rjeff24, correct? On Twitter. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.